You. Good afternoon, everybody. It is 12 noon. It is Friday, the 19th of March. Got to remember which month it is as we're heading through lockdown. And we're heading to the weekend, which means it is Lessons in Leadership. And today I am absolutely delighted to welcome a good colleague and friend, Donnie MacNichol, the Complex Change Catalyst. Hello, Donnie.
Hello, Mary.
Lovely to have you here. Now, Donnie and I know each other because we've been working together on a mastermind which has been interrupted by the pandemic. So our mastermind, which started out as 12 months, has gone on for about 18 months so far and is still going on longer. But the reason I asked you onto this show today, Donnie, is because when I hear you talk about your work, you're a consultant, but you're also entrepreneurial as well. So it's that mixture of being a consultant and being massively entrepreneurial, which means that you have a lot of plates that you're spinning. You seem to have your fingers in lots of pies and supporting people in so many different ways. So I'd like to just ask you to just summarize what are some of the different work streams that you have going on at the moment, to give an illustration to our viewers as to the sorts of work you get up to.
Yeah, I'll try not to dwell on it because no one wants to sit and listen to me whittle on about the things that I'm doing. It's more about, as you say, the journey. There's about 3 different things or levels that I work at, and I jump between them, and that's likely why it can be confusing. There's it's all around the big project program portfolio, words, complex change, and at the organisational level, it tends to be working on programs that have got high level of complexity, so involved with a parliamentary program, multi-billion-pound program there, some work around that, also helping Baltic State government adopt how they're going to create a pipeline of investable projects, working in nuclear sector about how to improve their capability, and a couple of other examples like that. That's the kind of organisational. There's the team level. So sometimes I get involved. I've been involved with High Speed 2 design teams, off-gem teams, and so on, about improving the dynamics within a group of people. So that brings in psychometrics and so on, things that we've talked about as well. And then there's the individual development level in this complex projects world, and that's running leadership programs, setting up academies. It's helping to set up advising a digital academy that's been set up as well at the moment. So love running the training. So the top one's consultancy facilitation stuff. The other one is then into facilitation, and the last one, if you will, is more developmental. And I jump, and I'll explain as we go through, I think, Mary, why I do that. It's not a choice I make. It is just I can't help it because of who I am and the way it's led through the leadership, the way that I've worked through in different leadership roles.
So there's something about how you've shown up as a leader and how you are in the world that has caused these different levels of interest and different levels of work streams to come through for you, is what I'm hearing. I'm just curious then, because you call yourself the Complex Change Catalyst, which I think is a brilliant description of who you are and what you do. Is that the common thread that holds these different streams together, or is there something else?
It likely, well, as you know, that came from our mastermind of people going, but what the hell is it you actually do? And unless you're kind of involved in our world, it's quite hard to. So we got it just down to change rather than writing project and program and portfolio and change. So stick to change. And complex is that it's just happened, I think, that most of the stuff, nuclear, multi-billion-pound construction, retail transformation, everything's really complex and it's highly ambiguous, multiple relationships, unclarity, lack of clarity. And that's where the complex change. And the catalyst, I can't remember who we finally narrowed it down to, but it was around what is it I do? And the word catalyst came up because it catalyzed, I dropped something into each of those layers that makes a difference. And that's where it came from. it's about the best description I've seen, and most people have said that's pretty good.
Yes. Yes.
You get
Yeah.
what you do now from 3 words.
Yes, it is fantastic, actually. It is so descriptive and so pertinent for the times that we're living in that, you know, change these days is never going to be straightforward. It's always going to be complex, and organizations and businesses are so much more complex, aren't they, as well? So I'm kind of hanging around here thinking, where do we start, Donnie? Because you've got obviously had quite a journey to get to be where you are. And there is something about the where you are is so representative of who you are as well. So I'm not quite sure where we need to start. Is there an area that you would feel you'd like to start with in sharing a bit about your journey?
Well, maybe I'll explain. I think now, with years and years of hindsight, looking back, there was a kind of, well, actually, maybe go slightly left field from what I thought, Mary. I've done some work about my own profile, personality, if you will. And if you take a simple one like DISC, if anybody's listening and use DISC, I'd come out as a yellow or an I. And I think now I can see I was always curious, always wanted to get involved in things, always wanted to bring people together to talk about things, always inquisitive. So shiny things are always very exciting. So it's almost like a magpie, I guess. So I think is from an initially being a designer, a designer in coastal through to, I was going to say sewage treatment works, how exciting. They're very critical, important part of national infrastructure. And then going in site, I was always curious as to what other people were doing and wanted to see what they were doing. So I did realize, I'm not sure if it's a good way of looking at it, but you know, going from design one company to the next design company, which they're a bigger and sexier project to work on. It's like, oh my goodness. Then from there into the other side, which is actually on the construction side, and seeing how that works and not designing something but actually building it. Again, I was just so curious about how people were doing it. And I think it was a bit around that time that I started getting into asking more why. So it wasn't enough to work on a project. I wanted to know why we were doing the project, which takes you onto more program level. Again, using lingo, or you know, it sits above the project level. And then I think the big shift for me in my career was the real big why was, but why were we doing the project? What was the business rationale for it? What were we trying to achieve? And that's what the jump was into the management consultancy.
Right. Okay. So kind of getting more in touch with the purpose of it all is what I'm hearing.
Now, interesting, without being boring for anybody who's listening to the construction sector, the companies I worked for, the last one was a company called Mace, who were still small at a couple of hundred. I think they're now tens of thousands. So if I'd stayed in Mace, likely I would have ended up doing the work that I wanted to do more of, but at the time they weren't doing as much. They were building things crudely. I wanted to work for management consultancy. It was, but why are we doing that project? What's the rationale for it?
Yes.
And again, I knew the construction world, but I didn't know other worlds. So this thing about curiosity came in, of going, you know, milk processing plants in Belgium, or you know, banking transformation in the Netherlands, or it was just, I was like, oh my goodness, this is so shiny.
Yes.
And so inquisitive and wanting to be involved.
So being curious is coming through as a real theme for you in terms of having that inquisitive nature. Anything that's new and shiny you were interested in. What are some of the learnings that came through from being so curious for you, Donnie?
Well, I think one of the, you know, when I was doing a lot of personal development, I love this phrase that a weakness is no more or less than the overdoing or misapplying of a strength.
Yeah.
And why do I mention that is my strength often turns to a weakness. So I will get involved in too many things. I'll overcommit.
Yes.
So I'm I hugely admire people who can be very focused and commit to a single thing and do it to 100%.
Yes.
Rather than actually wanting to be involved. My strength of curiosity, everything is in creativity and innovation and thinking, so it's great, but there is a downside to it because you keep working in many different things and don't always finish one particular element. So there's a learning there about if you take it up to the top level, the more you know about yourself, the greater impact it will have on how you lead. Now, that's just one of maybe 1,000 different characteristics you could talk about.
Yes, and I suppose to generalize that out, then yours is about curiosity, but for anyone, being aware of your strength and also how it could fall into being a weakness, by having that level of self-awareness helps you manage it much more effectively.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's I have to say, does that mean that I always now can control that or always conscious of it? No. It just is that in my moments of total sanity and clarity, I can look at, right, you're grossly overcommitted and things. That's of your own doing. It's not of the outside world's doing. That's your doing. So I think you can apply it to anyone, whether they're too forceful and assertive, whether they are not inquisitive enough, or there's so many things that can get that. And it's one of the, I do not a huge amount, but I have done a fair amount of lecturing. And I've loved getting involved with MSc students in particular, because that often the people in their 20s who are often doing the MScs don't get given these insights, as you know, Mary, to get someone like yourself as a coach or so on. You're typically maybe in your 30s, but more likely 40s or 50s, where you've been given, you're sent in the Wharton or weeks long this, or sent to side to do their major programs 5-day, or you tend to be older. But in fact, the skills of leadership you need from being, you can argue before university, at university, but certainly directly after it, so that they get, so this is how I am, this is my leadership style. How does that work in the context that I'm fitting it? And so it frustrates me considerably that the people-based skills are not always pushed as much.
So there's something about putting that more on the general curriculum at a very early age, really, pre-university, even when people are in school, making sure that people start to build awareness around what leadership is and the impact they can have personally on each other as leaders. So that sounds really pertinent. I want to take us back a bit, though, because you talked about the fact that your strength overplayed can cause you to be overcommitted, and I'm making it mean overwhelmed at times. How do you keep your sanity? And we laughed about this earlier, because do you keep your sanity is another question to ask. But how do you keep your sanity when there are so many different things that you're juggling? And I know this is going to resonate with lots of people who are leaders and working in organizations today, because there is so much demand being placed on people. So how do you keep your cool and keep yourself going through having so many plates spinning at any one time, Donnie?
Well, I guess like most people, you balance it out with your family. Now that may be, dare I say it, I'm not making any judgments, that could be your dog, that's your family, or you've got a partner, or you've got children. I'm blessed, I've got 2 children, I've got a lovely wife, gorgeous wife, and that's something that, supportive as they are, interested they are not.
Right.
So that's one level of, am I relatively happy, energetic, and so on. That's my loving, caring. That's the prime measure. All this other stuff that goes on is my stuff in some ways, although they're completely supportive. The other more tactical things are, like to keep myself fit. And I know if with TJ or Thomason here, because they're always doing their chats, but would be able to understand the mechanics of this. But keep myself fit. So I was spinning this morning, doing 30k in my spin bike in my office this morning.
Yes.
Try and get physically out and have an adventure on my steed out at the weekends, and walking. So
yeah,
always trying to be out amongst trees. We live in Cobham in Surrey, and it's not far to get into wooded areas. And I have to say, I now, through listening to TJ and others, I now will not just walk through trees, I'll actually try and look up. So I'm looking at trees. So
physically noticing, being in that environment and connecting with nature and looking after yourself physically, as well as having that emotional support from your family, kind of keeps you grounded, is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely. No, it depends on what level of groundedness. Sometimes, I wish I was as grounded maybe as I feel right now, even though my commitments are likely greater than they've been in years.
Yes.
But, sometimes you have much less on and you don't feel so grounded.
Yes.
And none of those things are working for you. There's always the far, more effective things of chocolate. Always, I don't mean that jokingly.
That's one of mine.
Predisposition, and if you've never tried tablet, then please try it if you're a sweet tooth, because it's like,
so get a sugar hit is what another way.
And sadly that is something that does I go to, but it's not necessarily a good one to go to.
Yeah. And finally, sort of, I'm also curious about, you mentioned, this is your overplayed strength, and we've honed on it a lot today. I didn't know this is where we were going to end up, but we have. You mentioned that I'm responsible. So when do you notice? Because it's like, when playing to our strengths and being curious and going, oh, that looks great, we do it unconsciously a lot of the time. We get ourselves involved in all these different things. So at what point do you notice, oh, right, I think I might be full. I think I might have got enough here. At what point can you say to yourself, that's enough?
What's
the warning sign? What's the warning sign, I suppose, is what I'm thinking.
Isn't it fascinating, the mind-body connection? Because, this morning, for a couple of things kicked off on top of all that, and it is straight into your stomach. And all of a sudden, you feel, so that's one, is there is physical sensation. I know, like a lot of people, I'm sure, shoulders, especially once you get to an age with 5 in it, shoulders start to be an issue. Your stomach, you start to get a fluttery stomach. And I think it's, it kicks into sleeping as well. I know when it gets really bad, but I do, again, many of the things, try not to do anything electronics. Look at electronics. I've got a Kindle, but try not to do that. And, not look at screens, et cetera, for a certain amount of time. So sleep, physical sensations and so on, those are the things that I go, okay, I need to do something. And I have, not very often, but I have had to say to people no to things. And I have, on a couple of occasions recently, had to but actually say to somebody, I just can't do that. I'm sorry. I'm at the 100, not in the 150%, because there is no such thing. I am literally at 100% capacity. I'm sorry, I can't help you with this. Or I said I would do X, but I can't, which I know we chatted about before. Is that some authentic leadership? Well, it's actually just being honest enough to say, I'm sorry, I just cannot do that for whatever reason it is.
Yeah. So learning to say no to things and putting some boundaries around.
Which in my side of the disc profile is not easy to do.
I can imagine that's something you have to learn to do and consciously do. So we're moving on in our conversation. And one thing I wanted to check in with you about, Donnie, was a sort of a moment in your life as a leader. So you've been a leader for many years now. You've been constantly leading on complex situations. I'm curious about a time that really caused you to sit back and think, aha, this is what it's really all about, and actually has impacted you in such a way that it's affected how you show up and lead today. So do you have a particular situation you can share with us that will resonate with those that are watching, or we do have people watching at the moment, in terms of a really big lesson for you?
I can think of one that I don't know why it keeps coming back and it's so prominent. I was working for PA Consulting in Copenhagen. Sadly, I didn't get any further than Western Europe with that when I was working at PA. And I can remember being, I think it's a smart arse consultant in a meeting where I went in and I sat down and there was various people from the bank there and I had done my job very well and they had big problems and they were trying to put blame on us, and I sat down and I tore them to shreds, not in any shouty sense. I was not, but basically using logic. And this is what was planned. This is what you were supposed to do. This is what we did. Blah blah blah. And got to the end of it, and kind of felt a little bit of unease. But I was relatively youthful at the time, and came out. And the partner said, "Oh." Never said anything. We finished up. There was 3 of us. I was kind of leading on it, and the partner said, "Great." We went back, did a little bit more work, and then as it came towards the end of the day, he said, "Look, any chance we could go out just for a quick coffee?" So I said, "Yeah." I said, "Great." So I was expecting the pat in the back, and he said, "Well, that was really good what you did today." And I almost said, "Yeah, that's thank you." And he went, "Really good." He said, "You've now got a customer who's now going to fight us every step of the way." He said, "You've embarrassed one of the senior managers. You've embarrassed his team. You have," and the list went on. So what I realized was my perception of the situation was warped, and it was very much about me. And I wasn't there to have a win. I was there to deliver a project. And to deliver the project, I had to get the client on board. So I did not understand the individuals. I did not understand the situation. Various things like that. And it was a kind of, wow. And I can remember that has stuck in my mind. And there's been many, many more, Mary. But that one stuck in my mind of, I didn't have self-control. I didn't understand myself. I didn't understand them as individuals. I didn't even understand what I was trying to achieve. We were trying to achieve from the meeting.
Yeah.
And the partner said, partly my fault. He said, "I should have been clear with you. What are we trying to achieve from this meeting?" And he may have spotted the fact you're fundamentally going to try and embarrass the client from this meeting. But we didn't have that up front because he trusted me that so it was, and that I think it was sometime around then I started doing self-development work and got involved by accident in landmark education.
Yes.
And then a few years later, NLP and various things that came from it. And I've always wondered, was that the kind of a catalyst?
Yeah. Well, I really love you've shared that, Donnie, because that is quite a raw story to share and very courageous of you.
Feels quite raw. Yeah.
Well, and really courageous of you to share it as well. So thank you for sharing it. And I think a really great example of how we think we might be doing the right thing, that we're doing a real service here, but actually we're doing it for ourselves. Inadvertently, we're doing it for ourselves at the cost of our clients or the other person that we're in the conversation with. So, and that put you on a journey of your own development. So how does that show up in the way you are with clients or with other people today? How does that impact the way you show up?
Well, because I've got to have relationships with large numbers of people, I try and don't always say to them, "Would you mind completing this diagnostic?" or whatever, but try and make some assessment. And of course, that is only one of 20 layers. You know, how stressed they are, what is it they really want to achieve, and so on. So there is a thing about, maybe a kind of lesson for anyone is, you know, the more you understand yourself, not necessarily you can control it, I may add, all the time, but at least if you understand, and the more you understand someone else, the much greater chance you have of building a relationship with them.
Yeah.
So I have to spend a lot of time and energy building relationships in many, many different areas with people.
Yes.
I have to say, as a slightly left field, just reflecting in this conversation in advance, I did realize how incredibly blessed I am because you know, if somebody told me I'd be doing what I'm doing now and being rewarded for doing what I'm doing now 10 years ago, maybe even 5 to some extent, I wouldn't have believed them. You know, I've got advisory board roles with companies that with the owners of businesses and so on, and I just love it. So there is a kind of, again, back to the personalities, you know better than me, it's one of those things that an I profile needs lots of praise.
Yes.
And I love it because I feel like I'm adding value, and if it's been appreciated back, that's a real win-win.
Yeah. And I hear that, you know, you feel blessed, but I think you've caused that. That's your leadership. So by going on that journey of personal development, you have created this, Donnie. So that, you know, don't shortchange yourself on that. You're the person that's at the source of it. So we're moving now into the final sort of moments of our conversation today. And we've got some people watching. And in fact, Gordon MacNichol has made a comment about tablet being the best. I'm presuming he may be another Scots person.
I know Gordon well. Yeah.
So for our final moments today, you know, you're an expert in leading on complex change, and we are in such an uncertain time still. Although things are looking on the up and we've got plans to come out of lockdown and everything, I'm just wondering, what would be your final parting words to people in terms of navigating the uncertain future ahead of us?
If there was one capability, and it's interesting from some of the client work I'm doing, this is coming out, competency models and so on, is that, so this is the boring part of the answer, hopefully, is everyone is starting to realize this thing about the term you know well, Mary, you know, the VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous.
Yes.
If you took the complex out, the volatile, uncertain and ambiguous is more and more where we are, the speed at which things change. If there was one thing, I'll be honest, it's not an easy thing to go and do a course on appreciating and understanding and dealing better with volatility, uncertainty, and so on. But that almost seems to be a kind of core thing now that people need to be when things will be finished, when we get back to normal. I'm not talking about necessarily us getting back to going to pubs and stuff. I'm talking about, everything will get back to normal in the program sense, and the project will have control of it. I think the level of uncertainty is growing in my work, the change world, and it's now, you just need to accept the fact you will never feel, even for the most ambiguous person like myself, you will never feel control. And I really do feel for people who are not the same disposition as self. I think, goodness, how do you cope in really complex, ambiguous situations when you need things to be boxed and shut?
Yes.
Again, there's a weakness for me, as I'm too comfortable in that, so I don't necessarily box things up as much as I could. So there's strengths and weaknesses in both. So
what's one piece of advice you would give to someone who does like things to be all boxed and neat and certain? For those people that likes uncertainty, what one piece of advice can you give them?
Well, back to where we started, is understand as much as you possibly can about yourself and the onion layer. If you read one book or looked at one site or did one diagnostic or did one thing, that will, as many layers as that as you possibly can to build up as good an understanding of yourself, so that you're better ready to deal with the situations and can even predict what will happen, because you know yourself, you can see the situation coming, and you can then better cope with it. And you know that it will be stressful because it's not in your sphere of influence or you're comfortable with. So that would be my one thing. Spend time understanding yourself.
Work on yourself first, understand yourself first, understand what your strengths and your potential weaknesses are, and that will help you deal with all the uncertainty that there is around. I guess because self-management is what's so key.
And I bet you that's the first time anybody's ever said that in an interview or ever, but it's kind of
do you know what?
It's so fundamental.
It is so fundamental, and it doesn't get said often enough, does it, really? Thank you so much for bringing that to light. And I just want to thank those that have been watching today, and for Gordon, who's made another comment about congratulating you and well done for the success that you've achieved, Donnie. So that's a lovely comment there. Do keep your comments coming. If you're watching this in catch up, we always love to hear from you in the comments boxes as well. That brings us to an end of this great interview with Donnie MacNichol. Thank you so much, Donnie.
Thank you, Mary, for giving me the opportunity.
It's been a real pleasure. Next week, we have Jodie Goldsworthy joining us, and Jodie is Executive Director for Leadership and Talent Development Practice at Gatenby Sanderson. So a really amazing woman leader coming to join us about how she's been leading and building that business. So do join us, same time, 12 o'clock next Friday. See you then. Bye for now.
Thank you.